Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Redzone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Redzone podcast. Today, I have brought on to this program a special guest. This special guest is Dr. David Murphy, and David is one of the world's leaders in working with children, their families, and young adults from their struggles and helping them with their struggles with time management and organization. He consults with families and addresses the needs of students in all grade levels who've been diagnosed with challenges like Asperger's, nonverbal learning disabilities, social emotional disabilities, ADHD, and all types of challenges related to this time management organization. And we get into all sorts of details related to the issues that are facing children, young children, middle school, high school. So if you have a child in any one of these categories, stay tuned, because some of the things that David brings up are just completely rock my world, and they will yours as well. Dr. Murphy received his bachelor's and master's degree in special education from UConn, University of Connecticut, and he earned a second master's degree in special ed from Southern Connecticut State University, and he completed his studies at Northeastern University, where he earned his doctorate in education. He currently lives in Duxbury with his wife and two kids, and he is an unbelievable runner. I'm talking, he can still crank out at 40 plus years old, close to 530 miles over 3 miles. So very, very accomplished athlete as well. And we get into conversation about how do you not coddle the emotions of kids, and what does that mean with child rearing and growing kids that are emotionally resilient? How do you, as a parent, not be afraid of your children failing? We talked about how you underpin family values and a lot of the strategy that you deploy as a parent. We also go into how you unhinge limiting beliefs with kids, how you establish a thinking about your thinking, how you develop the patterns of emotional behavior that you can be resilient in the face of uncertainty, in the face of doubt, in the face of failure and failing. Also, FOMO, fear of missing out, the effect of the digital generation, of how you help your kids navigate and help families navigate fear of missing out effect with the phone and other digital distractions that I have been personally really trying to become an expert in with my family. But from David's perspective, Dr. Murphy shares techniques and strategies and tactics of how you can deploy the right type of approaches to supporting your family values as it relates to this digital age and raising resilient, emotionally very, very strong and powerful children. So with this, I want to welcome you to listening to this incredible interview that I had and I completed with Dr. David Murphy. Thank you. Well, David, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a very unique episode for today because I am bringing my brother, Dr. David Murphy, onto the show. And so I want you to tell everybody, David, a little bit about, let's go back to more from the beginning. So tell me what you currently do today, and then how did you get to that point?
So what I do today, I'm an educator. I am a special education teacher at a high school level, and I do that during the day. And when I'm not in the classroom, I am a business owner. I run a successful coaching practice that targets academic coaching, executive function coaching, life coaching, and college coaching as it relates to students and adults. So we target skills and we help our clients reach their goals. So I really wear two hats, two professional hats, and really carved out a life for myself that's really exactly what I want to do. So I wake up every morning really blessed by the fact that not only does my life not suck, but I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing.
I know you are doing exactly what you want to be doing. And I'm going to go a little off script right now, but for all of you listening, Redzone was founded 18 years ago. And David, you were involved pretty much in the beginning of Redzone. And I want to know, was there any behaviors you learned in the launching of Redzone that you've deployed in the launching of your own consulting business?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think anybody listening will laugh when you say you have to have jobs that suck so that you can figure out really what you want to do in life. So, I think that's a rite of passage to have jobs that suck, because you have to cross off certain things off of your list until you start to narrow down maybe something that you're good at. And I found out through a lot of trial and error. One was working for my brother Bill, that it was a very exciting opportunity to work for my brother, to help his business, which desperately needed my help. Just kidding. But to really find out that it's a job, it was a career path that definitely did not match my strengths, my passions, or my interests.
Well, okay, so that maps to my second part of my question, which is, okay, so we know what you're doing right now, and we're going to get into that much more deeply, but how did you get to the point that you're right now a doctor providing these services to parents and their children? What did this launch actually? What age do you think that this began, and what did you overcome to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I'll see if I can capture the story quickly. But I was born having to struggle to learn, and so from a young age, I had to grind out those fourth grade spelling quizzes, and I would spend hours at night studying for those quizzes and walk in, take the quizzes, and soon after go right back to being a really crappy speller. But I developed through really my own growth a perspective around what it takes to learn. And in high school, senior year in high school, I went to an all-boys Jesuit school. We had to do a community service, and I ended up working in a special needs school. And from there, I started to realize that I was phenomenal at connecting with kids. And I started to pursue that in college. And from there, I went into the inner cities, teaching inner city students at something called at-risk youth, and started to realize that I was really good at it. I had extreme patience, but more importantly, I could really connect with the kids that no one else has ever been able to connect with, and I could help them learn. And that's really where I found myself, I don't know, just flourishing and moving into administration, and going from there into pursuing my doctorate eventually, realizing that I might as well go to the top of the ladder. I did believe as a special ed teacher that I would never be a poor teacher. I would always pursue financial prosperity in my vocation as a teacher. So, anybody that knows me knows that I'm kind of relentless in my pursuit of not only my passion, but the financial benefits that come with it.
Well, for sure, David, you've been an entrepreneur from the get-go, and I think that's why, even though I'm the oldest of 8, it's something that I appreciate a lot about you and hearing in your journey. And I think one of the things from my audience is that everybody here has children for the most part, or they're planning to have children. And I think everyone knows that primary development and most important development is 0 to 7 years, 0 to 8 years. And so I want to hit that time frame really clearly, because you mentioned that you struggled early on with learning. And so back then, we didn't really know, did we? We didn't really know if someone was struggling, all of the tools we have at our disposal today. Like, what can parents do if they notice something going on with their children today?
As you can imagine, I'm surrounded by extremely conscientious parents. I don't get a phone call from a parent that's not conscientious, right? But when I think back to my childhood, I struggled with dyslexia. I struggled with language-based disability. I had some pretty glaring issues. So it was really easy for the professionals around me to say, "Whoa, this kid has a kind of a different profile, learns differently. We should get him services." So I was fortunate, and I was thrown into kind of the service delivery model at a young age. But there are so many kids that fall through the cracks because they're bright enough, right? They're capable enough, and They are good learners, but there are other issues that persist, and parents see it, and sometimes they mask it, right? And so the school doesn't see it. So the school just carries on, and the parents carry on because the parents have taken on the burden of maybe compensating, right, for their child's challenges so that they look good on paper and they look good to this classroom teacher. So that becomes significant. So I say at a young age, I would say the first thing you should do is if there are issues, whether they're academic, social, emotional, is to make sure everybody knows and everybody sees the challenges. Sometimes that means you have to pull back a little bit as a parent. You have to say, I need to let my kid fail here so that the school understands the significance of the gaps or the significance of the challenges. And that's hard for any parent to do, is to let their kid fail. But if you do it thoughtfully and you do it deliberately and you do it with a high level of communication, then it becomes more supportive than detrimental.
So, I mean, we're in a very comfortable environment for raising kids in the Western culture, and certainly, even the poorest of the United States are in the top 1% of the world. And I know you're in a town that is probably in the top 1/10 of 1%. Like, what do you find the mistakes parents, and I think generally most of our listeners are in comfortable communities. We're not on the edge of survival. So the kids are growing up just comfortable. Like, how do you establish some amount of resilience and grit in kids? What's been your experience, and what are some approaches you take?
The one universal theme is this struggle with emotional dysregulation or emotional regulation. And so many young kids are raised with an intense relationship with how they feel because they are parented that way. So we coddle the emotions of our children at a very young age. And for example, we eat what we like. That's an emotional relationship with food, right? So at a young age, I would say it's really helpful to get away from that discussion around what do you like? What food do you like to eat? At a very young age, if you can train your child, and this is really primitive, right, to learn how to eat food that may not taste good but is good, you can start to use that as just one small little example, but it's multiple times a day, this relationship around emotional strength. We do things because they are meaningful. We don't have to do things just because it feels good, right? I pursue my goals, and sometimes in my pursuit of my goals, I have to do things that don't feel great.
Yeah, that's so important.
And in doing that, I can only climb that kind of hurdle if I have prerequisite skills around emotional regulation, around recognizing that this doesn't feel good, and I'm really good now because my parents have raised me to be tolerant of that emotional feeling that, this doesn't feel good, but I can still blaze through it because I've been trained through either language or practice, or even having parents they're just amazing role models, right? So a lot of our kids, they watch us. And they watch us struggle, and they watch us talk about our struggles, and they watch us persevere, and they watch us talk about persevering. I think that can also play out significantly well as you watch your kids struggle, but eventually they start to realize that I can be just like my mom or dad.
It's interesting you say that, and I want to make sure I understand about food, because I personally, my kids, as you know, are 18, 16, and soon to be 14, and I watch their eating habits now, and I can tell I just really screwed up. I got a lot of things right, but I screwed up on the eating side because it was more about what they liked about food. And instead of me just laying out really great dishes, whether or not it met something that their palate liked or not. So part of this is like people that are too late. Like, I'm too late right now with that. I can't swing the needle. I really don't think I can switch.
Right. Right.
I had done it differently, 0 to 8. How could I have done it differently, David? Like, what would have done it differently?
Right. So I use the food not as like a end all be all, right? But from a parenting perspective, you have to try to grab a hold of opportunities. So I use that as just an example of an opportunity to allow your child the chance to struggle with the emotional dysregulation around eating what's put in front of you, because that's what we're having for dinner. This is the meal. and having to overcome that struggle around, oh, but I don't like this. and then coming to their natural conclusion that when I'm hungry, I'll eat. I'll almost eat anything. But I don't need to get to that point. But it is about the training ground and the opportunity to train, as opposed to just pacifying and moving on, right? Or providing only food that your child likes, as opposed to establishing certain expectations around, in this family, we're always doing stuff that's difficult. We're always doing things that are hard. And we're always having to make decisions around doing what's important, like eating healthy, versus maybe what feels good in the moment. And you can use that meal time as a family training ground, as a family expectation, family values, and make it bigger than it really is from a primitive perspective, or make it bigger as in terms of this, this emotional regulation of things. And this is what we see it as a generation. Schools now are promoting this thing called SEL, social emotional learning. They're putting down pens and paper. They're putting down textbooks to promote social emotional learning. And this is happening in middle schools and high schools across the country. It's a massive initiative. Now, if I were to have prevented this, I would have gone all the way back to when these children were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I would have worked deliberately with parents on training children to handle the emotions of life through expectations, and doing that at a really young age, because that's what you build on.
Right.
Expectations never go away. Standards don't go away. You build on them. And the resilience of being able to handle the expectations is built at a really young age. You can't just throw the kid into something at 16. You think about how many kids don't work at a young age. And I think work provides a training ground for resilience and affirmation of my independence in this planet, right? And a lot of children, we push them into other activities or no activities. I think as a generation, as a parents in this generation, where you should always be asking, how do I continue to develop my child's place in this planet so that they are affirming themselves in their developmental milestones in life? The license is now outdated, but still relevant so there's certain milestones that my children should be achieving. Chores at a young age. You throw your child 15 chores at the age of 5, and you set the expectation that they handle the emotion of doing that. I don't care if it's emptying the dishwasher. I don't care if it's taking the dog. I don't care if it's walking around the yard and picking up dog crap. But you set that bar.
I love that. I love the way you frame something. I love the way you use language with the emotional. I'm not even using it right. And I listen to it. It rings true, but it's the emotion.
And Bill, let me add to it. And then your child comes back to you and says, "I hate this chore." I said, "Great. I love that that this is pushing you. And I love that you're still willing. You're still going to take care of it, because in this family we always do things that are hard."
Yeah.
And even though it may feel hard, and even though we want to run away from it, we understand the value of it because you're part of this family and we take care of each other. So you let me know if you need help, but I think you can handle this on your own, as you give your 5-year-old 6 poop bags and a bucket to go around and pick up all the crap in the yard. Right. So again, it's not about a chore. If you can make it something so much more meaningful.
What I love is the way you tie it to family, David. And you said basically, this is what we do in the family. This is what the Murphy family does. You're bringing me back to a time maybe 5 years ago where it was like one of my kids was having an issue and we had to make like a global family. I had to make a global family decision, but it was really one child that was impacted. But I had to say, this is what we as Murphys do. And it was much better than just singling out that one behavior pattern. But I love the way you've done this just with teaching the kids with chores.
Yeah, we outsource a lot, Bill, as a generation. And I think you've talked about establishing family breakfasts, but it's really hard to claim the time to work on that family aspect of things. And, we've come to a place where we outsource a lot. And I think this is one thing that I think this next generation needs to become more vigilant at, so that our children are connecting viscerally to the values of a family.
So I got a question about that and you and I had talked a little bit about this before. And so I'm going to make sort of a statement that we didn't talk about, but I will build upon it. I truly believe that much of culture right now is trying to demasculinize the role of the father because it's uncomfortable with the alpha male approach to child rearing, at least from a society level. So tell me what you think the impact is of males raising kids. Can you give me some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We just talked about this the other day. Well, not you and I, but I have a 4-year-old son. So for everyone listening, I'm in the weeds, and I have to look my son in the face and say, I'm going to teach you how to be a man. I'm not going to teach you how to be less of a man. And I'm a teacher, so I see how education promotes a passive behavior that has historically been more aligned with female-like behaviors. That's why females crush academics, right? They crush school because it's more naturally aligned with their innate abilities or innate personalities. Boys, on the other hand, have had to conform with far greater struggle. So then that's one significant roadblock. But for men and for dads, it's you have to help your son learn what it's like to be a man. And we've taken away so much of what men needed, like responsibilities that were far beyond themselves. And now they really don't know what to rest their hat on. They don't know where their identities are anymore. And so they get kind of lost. They stop engaging because there's really no fire. There's no drive to fulfill a societal role.
I love that.
And this isn't a criticism. It just is what it is. And this is a better byproduct of the movement to empower women, which has been amazing. I have a daughter that's 10, and she is the beneficiary of that. And then, but there's this other side where no one's addressing the men. And so the male tendency may be to just become passive without that fire, without that societal expectation driven into them. But this is what a man looks like. This is how a man behaves. And this passive engagement that I see across most men. I mean, if they're not on the lacrosse field, they're passive in their engagement.
Well, it's just even the conversation we're having gets people riled up. So, for example, I read a book, Strong Father, Strong Daughter. There was a huge
great book. Great book.
Huge.
I give that as gifts, Bill, for new dads. Oh, absolutely.
I might have screwed some things up, but I got a lot right. And I was deeply, I've read a lot of the literature on raising daughters, and Strong Father, Strong Daughter was a complete license to be a man and to be a father, and that the female, my daughters really needed me not to be feminine. They needed me to be my natural instincts. And so it taught me to lean into my natural instincts. And fortunately, I had a good counterbalance in the family with strong feminine role model and strong feminine wife. And she allowed me. So it was great. It was a great give and take. And so I love this conversation because it's so necessary.
It is. And I'm not sure if I'm giving the examples or what to do to the audience out there, because it is a very broad stroke kind of topic. But if I think about my 4-year-old son, well, when he has temper tantrums like a boy would, how you address them matters, right? So whether it's the physicality of a child, well, do you squelch the innate desire to wrestle and hit and fight and be loud? Or do you help shape it? Right? Do you role model it? Or do you squelch it? Do you punish it? Because it isn't passive enough. It isn't behaviors of an appropriate student. And I think that's where as a young man, they have to know that male-like behaviors are okay. And how you shape it, how you use those behaviors to create and to shape worlds and to accomplish goals and to provide and to take care of and to defend. You just use all of that. Use it all. Absolutely. And you'll see your son connecting with his innate self in a positive way and not feeling shame that he's too manlike.
What do you think about the statement, kids don't care what they say they care what you do? and again, we didn't talk about this, but what happens, do you find, and then again, maybe, so I think it's almost, we talked about this a little bit. It's like you have the 0 to 8, and then you sort of have like the 13 to 18. And I'm sitting here going, well, there's almost like two audiences. One is, well, those years are done, 0 to 8, 0 to 10. I'm in the back end. What do I do here? But I'm actually just generally, metaphorically speaking, how many kids do you see at the effect of the parents kind of spouting, here's what you should do, but they don't actually walk their walk?
Yeah, as they get older, the burdens should be placed on them of what is typical and what developmentally appropriate, so that they are learning how to bear the burdens of a young man. Now, we think academics. I don't give a shit about academics. I care about raising men. Now, what are the burdens? Responsibilities. And keep with the family, story that we've been weaving throughout this talk is, what are the developmental burdens that young man should take on? And how does he own them and claim them and affirm his place in the family with them? It's so important. You know what they'll end up doing? They'll find their social media tribe, and they'll start to identify with that. I see all the time.
So I got a story that you can maybe help me out. So obviously my son. He's a high performer. He's in APs and honors for most of the classes, and he's self-selected into them this year as a junior. And now, the rubber meets the road. We're a couple weeks into school year, and he starts spouting, what's the relevance to school? I don't use any of this stuff. I'm not going to use it in the future. And I've always been in the thinking that when my kids were like yours, David, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, I'm actually not raising a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old. I'm raising a kid that's 10 years older. So like parenting from a 10-year-old 10 years later perspective. So with my son now, I'm sitting here going, well, he's at a divide, at a point where what's the relevance of all of this material? Because it's really about the grit and does he grind through stuff that he hates or doesn't like or doesn't see the relevance of? How do you coach kids through it? Like, he doesn't have necessarily an issue, David, but I know you're seeing kids that are sort of on the, they're really struggling. Like, what would you say to a child like that?
Well, if you were to go back to kind of the younger children, right? If you were to kind of say developmentally, let's go through different ages or categories of life development. Younger kids, if you are always talking about their goals, your goals, the future of things, if you're always trying to paint a picture of what life can look like or what life, then you can train the brain and train the emotions to align with the habits that create those goals. And you can start talking about it at a young age. Like you mentioned, children watch their parents and they listen to their parents. So we can be amazing role models, and they may not demonstrate our role modeling until years go by, but it is extremely powerful. But for children with or without disabilities, the goals of life matter. And when we have disengaged youth, it becomes far more important that we try to help those children, young adults, affirm their place on this planet, right? Because when they start to do that, they start to find their identity. They start to find their calling. They start to find their mission, their purpose, their drive, and they start to figure out what they're good at, what they're not good at. Now, and when you think about your son, for example, like Hunter, he's selected into these hard courses, which is rare. Most kids get put into them by their parents, or it's just the way things have been. But to select into him is a testament to him. Now he just has to figure out how to pull it off. And obviously with the expectation is no, you're not dropping. You'll figure it out, and I believe that you will, because I've seen you do this time and time again, and you always come out on the other side with the results that you're looking for.
Okay, this is going to be funny because the way I approach this, so it's going to be, you'll be like, oh, this goes Bill again. But for my audience, they're like, this is going to be brand new for them. So I said to Hunter, we could drop out. I mean, of course, he's going to a private school. He's not going to drop, but he smiled at me. I said, you could drop out. I said, you can go work at Walmart. I said, they don't care whether or not you're studying British literature, and you can make $10 an hour. I said, or we could go be a plumber. We could go be an electrician. You can be an apprentice and start that right now. I said, and I don't have to pay any college or anything. And you could be making more money
over the next 4 years, then the kids coming out with debt and all sorts of issues coming out of college and making the same money and way beyond them. I said, or you can go start a business. Like right now, all this is meaningless and you can start a business. I said, but if you're not going to actually go out and start mowing lawns and have that real gear for right now, then entrepreneurship or doing something entrepreneurial, then that's off the table. And I don't think unless you really want to go down the vocational route, which is nothing wrong with that. It's a great option. And so I kind of worked through all his decision points that he's fully in control of. And I told him, I said, I don't care if you go to college. I said, but you better have another path. I said, you better either be an entrepreneur or go in the Peace Corps or do something that is going to be a learning pathway. And I don't know.
Yeah, and for your audience listening to you, here's a takeaway that I will frame out for everyone, is what you've done is you've simply given your child control, or you've framed out the reality that they are where they are, but there's all these other choices, right? So it's sometimes comforting to know that I have other choices in life. Now, no option is not an option, like you said. Right? I can't just choose nothing. Like a lot of kids, they just won't pick anything, so therefore by default they've picked nothing, and that's that passive, disengaged personality that many parents are fighting against. It's the kid that moves back home after college, and you're like, "What the hell are you doing back in my house? It's been 3 months." Right? So, no option is not an option, but these are your options. Pick one, or stay exactly where you are and make the absolute best of it. But regardless of where kids are, I've had kids that barely graduate high school. They're living at home. And they have to really, now they're grown up. Like, you've just decided to grow up much quicker than those kids heading off to college. Now, what do you do? Now, mom and dad may still be involved. Well, mom and dad can't be involved. They have to step aside and they have to really pull the reins back so that child grows up quickly, or else they're going to get stuck. And you're going to develop certain things like, these feelings that I now can't get on. I cannot break these cycles. And because you just get stuck in a permanent rut at a young age, and that's super hard. It's almost like an addiction. It's super hard to break. So the younger you start working on these developmental milestones and you start helping children take the burdens and affirm their place, it'll set them up. So when they do look at you and they say, what's the purpose of school? I don't know. You tell me, kid. There's all these other options. Pick one. But if you want to stay where you are, right? And I think that's really for me. I have kids that go to voc high schools and they crush it. They love it. They found their place on the planet. It was super hard for them to leave their friends and go and do that. But making that stand at a young age, my hat off to them, because you are making decisions that takes strength and a fearlessness, where your friends are too, they will never do that because they'd rather be where they are.
Too afraid of what other people think about them.
Right. Suffering than to make a leap, like to go to a voc school and pursue something far more aligned with your innate gifts and your interests. And I think we live in a generation where people are typically afraid of doing what's not typical. And we live in a generation where there's so many opportunities now outside of this brick and mortar construct of education, and to allow children a chance, the freedom to look at it and explore it, whether they come back or not. He could have called your bluff in a way, but whether they come back or not, they are now making decisions. One of my most important recommendations to all parents is force your children to make their own decisions. You may frame out the options. Make a decision. Have some conviction. Stand for something. And I think that's really important. And to have parents that do the same and role model what it looks like is really kind of it's a perfect scenario.
So role modeling, decision making, role modeling, conviction, and you're saying that that's very, very helpful.
It's huge. And what you're battling, what we are battling as a parent in this generation, is we're battling the distractions of social media and the online world. So there's this term called FOMO, fear of missing out. And what ends up happening in this is children are getting pulled at a really young age outside of the family. And they're getting pulled into the potential identification with other groups. and to the point where they have such strong relationships with other groups that they start to form very different belief patterns, very different thinking, and they start to see themselves as maybe more than just their family at a too young of an age.
That's interesting.
When they're really not developmentally ready. And we see this when you hand a child a cell phone, in fourth grade. It's just too early. Fifth grade, still too early. Sixth grade, still too early. I mean, you'll hear me push the envelope all the way to ninth grade, because what you're doing is you're giving them an opportunity to lose themselves when they should be just focusing on the parents, their family, and their school, and maybe a couple of good friends. Because honestly, you don't need more than that. You don't need more than a couple good friends. You know why there's two good friends, Bill? Why wouldn't I say three good friends? You know why just two good friends?
Why do you pick the number two?
In case one's not around. But right. Other than that, like, we as a society, we seem to push this need for social connection at a massive scale. And in doing that, our kids get so confused and distracted and lost. When really you want to help them be successful, keep them focused on their family. Keep them focused on what matters. And that's mom and dad, brother, sister.
So, David,
good night's sleep.
One of the things I have a question for you about is, so this is something that I wouldn't say I totally screwed up, but it definitely is one of the bigger challenges is, we used to gather in the family room to watch anything. I mean, to watch Cheers growing up, to watch any sort of game. You gathered around the television and watched it, or a big baseball game or whatever was happening.
You don't want to admit that you watched the Cosby Show, Bill? You can say that.
Cosby Show. Oh my gosh, goes on and on. Chips.
Friends.
Wheel of Fortune. No.
Right.
So I think one of the things that we used to all kind of gather, but it was a forced point where you just got the chance, you could just sit and watch or whatever it may be. Now the kids can get all that information streamed, on a phone or an iPad, and sometimes the school iPad can still do stuff that's outside of school on it. And so, even though we have a rule that you have to come down, as if you're watching TV, meaning even if we're on YouTube or watching videos on Instagram, watching videos anywhere, you got to come down to the room. It's very difficult to police that, and certainly with technology, you can certainly take a hold of it. But I have particularly found that a challenge because of the nature of they are doing their homework often on the iPad, of which so the systems are on, they're getting alerts on this stuff. And you had some interesting suggestions because, and the reason I'm bringing this up because 4 or 5 years ago, you had some really good things to say about this. And I'm seeing that play out now with my daughter in college, where she just texted us the other day and she goes, I now shut down all of my electronics when I'm doing homework. And I had to sign a policy with each teacher in my college has a policy they have to sign that says they will not bring a phone and have a phone turned on in their teaching environment in the classroom.
Yeah.
So what can you do? What are some strategies parents can do when they're coming home late from work? Kids are all over the house. They think they're doing homework, but they're not sure if they're piping television right down to their, how do you handle this?
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you kind of professional answers and I'll tell you personally. So maybe I'll start personally. So I'm fortunate. My internet service is so old that they don't even offer it anymore. The bandwidth that I have available in my house is so low that you can only stream one video at a time. so from a parent perspective, this is the best solution ever. Like, my kids just get all fired up. They just can't do anything online. It's like, great. But that's not necessarily reality, because kids have to do work online. They have to be able to, flip instruction. They have to be able to do academic stuff, at home, and they have to be able to upload videos and do stuff that may be productive, right? But you can still have, and kids love this. You just know this by your children. Like, they will adhere to standards if their parents lead the way. So if you have time zones and locations where this is tech-free time zone, this is a tech-free environment, and where you're unplugged, kids actually appreciate that. They don't fight it. If you've established a right culture in your family, they don't fight it. They'll typically embrace it, especially if the parents lead the way. And where, you don't have to have the TV on all the time. you have it off all the time, unless there's a reason that it's a family reason to have it on. I don't know. Maybe it's news at 6 o'clock, or it's Red Sox. I'll typically have the Red Sox game on mute. And why? I don't know. I just want to have a family environment where we were appreciating, local team.
Appreciating the fourth place that they're finishing this year?
Oh, yeah, but even that. Okay, we're failing this year, but we can still cheer them on to the bitter end. So I think families should be allowed to do that, and they should be empowered to do that. And that starts with mom or dad stepping up and declaring a break in family values. And I'm losing my children. I'm losing you. I'm losing you. I'm losing you. I have yet to see your eyes. I've yet to see you smile. You've yet to see my eyes. You've yet to give me a hug. Like all these things that don't happen, and we can just ignore because no one's in danger, right? But I think we have to make that change. It's very different than how we were raised. And no, we don't have to sit down on a Thursday night and watch a show, but we sure can have quiet time between 7 and 9 where everybody is doing their work in the common area. I have a huge expectation with all of my families is you find a common area where children do their work, no longer in the bedrooms. Bedrooms is the worst place. You have to have a very, very intrinsically motivated child to let them do their work in their bedroom. Teach them how to do their work at a young age in a common area and help them understand what it looks like to be a student. And that means, removing all the devices, removing all the distractions, and you promote a culture in the house that allows that to happen. Meaning, like, if your children are surrounding you doing your work, you can't be watching TV. You can't have a lot of noise going on. Promote a culture downstairs around productive library-like environments so kids can feel like they can sit around their parents and get their work done. They don't have to run to their bedroom.
So you don't do your homework laying down on your back in your bedroom?
Typically, no. And historically, it wasn't ever a big deal. But because I can find every dark corner on the planet in the comfort of my bedroom, I just have to be vigilant about that as a parent. I have to recognize the craziness of trying to say that's appropriate. I mean, if that is appropriate, then you might as well let your kid go anywhere they want outside of your house. Just give them a car. I don't care if they're 12, and just let them go wherever they want because because it's the same thing.
It was more friction. It was more friction around getting, I think I was interested in the same things my son and daughters were, in the sense of, mostly my son, if I was really interested in looking at cars and hot rods and looking at the newest shoes and all this. I mean, I was really, and this was without the digital age. There's always an allure with what's around the corner. And I remember, baseball cards and all this stuff. So there was always friction to get it. Like there was a comic book or something that I had to reach for, or a catalog I had to get via the mail. Now, if I was interested in the latest Supreme shoes, all I have to do is just get an automatic alert sent from that company, and it's hitting my phone. And if my phone is adjacent to me, it's a distraction. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I have been. I'm going to say it's been a struggle, but hopefully 10 years, 20 years from now, I can look at the effects of my parenting and it'll be a success. But to me, that the ability to be self-aware and be able to have guardrails around things has been both the biggest challenge, and hopefully that we'll see in the future whether it pays out, whether there's guardrails to behavior that they can learn and see.
Yeah, and we're not talking like this is a crisis that parents need to just drop everything and go helicopter parenting. I think there's a truth across this generation that kids have to figure it out. Like they have to figure it out. Maybe it's in college where, like you're saying, Haley says she figured it out. And it took years of struggle to get to where she is, but she's realizing some simple truths. I'm a far better student when I give 100% of my attention to reading and writing and thinking. Right? But there are kids that will struggle for a very long time without help. And those are the ones that I work with.
Okay.
So, you have to get to know your child. You have to have these conversations. You have to say, I will give you a chance to fail. But if you don't figure it out on your own, I'm going to step in. Because I believe that through failure is the most powerful form of feedback. So I will give you that opportunity. But I'm not a fan of insanity. I don't expect you to be making the same mistakes over and over and over again. and then complain to me about the results.
What's the best question to ask your teenage kid? Like, parents are coming home, they're coming in hot from the day at work. The kids are either there already or they're in the car coming back from sports or whatever. What's a good question to ask that doesn't fall into the pattern of like, hey, how was your day? And hey, how you doing? And, what's a good engaging question that makes the kid's head snap and be like, holy crap, that was a good question?
Yeah, so if there is a concern around something, the most powerful question any parent can ask is, what's up? Now, you're not framing it that way, but that was the first thing that came up as you started to ask the question is, if there is a problem that you know of, but you know your child is struggling to figure out, many parents will jump in with the solution and just tell their kid what to do. I'm not a fan of that, of course, because it doesn't teach anything. So one of the most powerful questions to ask is, what's up?
What's up?
And,
okay.
and as you ask that question, you may follow it up with, I'm noticing you're struggling. You can finish that maybe if you need to, but maybe the kid already knows what you mean, or you look frustrated, or, what's up? It's a way of really engaging with a teenager in a non-judgment way, which lets them know that you notice something's going on, which is good. It's good for children to know that parents are aware, but it really puts the child in the driver's seat around having to figure it out. Now, you can be part of the brainstorming and the problem solving, but you're not going to solve the problem. So that's a really powerful strategy for any parent that is chronically solving their child's problems, chronically nagging, chronically in the weeds, really the frontal lobe of their child. Now, the first 100 times you say that, you're not going to get much. But on the 101st time, you may start to see your child really answering the questions with far greater ability than when you first started. But, other than that, I think if you have just wanting an ongoing great relationship with your kids, coming home with a certain expectation around discussions around the day can be really powerful, where when you come home and your kids have a chance to come down and connect, just talk about what that looks like. Talk about the expectations around just connecting on both sides. Do you want to connect with me? I mean, my she's in 10th grade, so she doesn't. She still wants to connect with her dad. So it can be framed around, what does that look like? Well, how about we get together in the kitchen and take a few minutes with a cup of chocolate milk and just connect on our day. My 4-year-old is learning right now, Bill. We're celebrating failure this year. And all year we're just talking about it. I said, I want to know what mistakes you made. He's coming home from preschool. What mistakes you make today, dude? Let's talk about it. And what did you learn? And so he's learning from me at a really young age around this mindset of failure and promoting it and celebrating it. And it's a part of life. So I want it to be part of our conversation. And when they get older, you can have the same conversations.
Yeah, that's such
and then they're more open about it.
I see that as an employer of 40 right now, and it's like there's really a big difference between how the brain reinterprets setback. And if there's one thing 20 years from now, because we won't know probably till then, if they look back and see how my kids navigate setback, how they navigate perception of failure, how they flip, how quickly can they flip mentally from, God, this sucks, my life is ruined, or the situation, I'm a permanent bad math student, to, this is an opportunity. I could actually figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great skill you're teaching.
Yeah, the other point to that, which is really cool, is my 4-year-old is learning, this is a year to really reinforce with him that, can't is a bad word. I make can't a word like any swear. And I get really animated when I hear it. And I get really jokingly serious, right? Or I have these kind of explosions of temper tantrums around it. Not because I'm trying to scare my children, because they know I'm joking, but I'm overemphasizing the relationship our family has with the word can't. Now, he's also learning, because I noticed at a really young age he was starting to see failure as a problem. And I was like, oh, man, I got to get on this right away. He didn't even want to do any competitive event because he didn't want to lose. And I was like, whoa, hold the bus. And I said, this is an opportunity. And so we just started tackling all these stories, telling my stories. Allie started, oh, Dad did that with me when your age. It's so, we start so much fun. We just talk about failure all the time and make all these mistakes. And we talk about like how, what I learned, how did I overcome it? And so he's learning from his sister as well. But the language of I hate, it's the excuse battles. Okay, I got to teach my child how to conquer excuses. And as parents, we can get really good at pacifying excuses. And even to the point where we justify their excuses.
Yeah, that's a never-ending, and I think the parents just have to be really resilient to this because holy crap, does it come hard and fast. And I've started young with this, but even now with my 14 and 16-year-old, it's like my son just gets so aggravated because he says, "What story are you telling yourself right now?" And what's the story? Because he thinks it's reality. And I said, what's the story you're telling yourself? And then my 13-year-old, I'm not going to need math. What are you talking about? You're a straight A student. Well, let's toss a tutor at that. And all of a sudden she experiences success. And I said, I guess you're not that bad at math anymore.
Right.
We just had to compensate. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting, the psychology, but holy mackerel, the impact on our society right now. And most of the crew listening here is going to be tech-oriented, leadership-oriented. It's not getting any slower. And the quicker our kids get out of ruts, mental ruts, cognitive ruts, the quicker that they can just easily move from bump in the road to elevation, bump in the road, elevation, bump in the road, elevation. And the more fluid and dynamic their experience will be because life's coming at them too fast to be sunk down too low for very long.
Yeah, the rebound. It's not about whether or not you fail or experience setbacks. It's how quickly can you rebound? Like how quickly can you learn your lesson and shift and adapt? And in my world, it's problem solving. So we're always talking about problem solving skills. What is that? It's a metacognitive process of thinking and about evaluating emotions, about recognizing what is an emotion I want to respond to. I have kids that say they hate to read. Bill, do you know what your future's like if you identify with that statement? You do not have an academic future. And these kids want to graduate high school. They want to go to college. Yet they are adamant in their relationship with I hate to read.
Well, David, how good of a reader were you?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, if there's one person that has every right to hate reading.
You were the worst of all of us, of all 8.
Brutal. I had to train myself, by myself, how to read. I had to train myself how to read. And, my pity party is not really big, right? But recognizing that everybody comes at learning from their own gaps, right? Their own strengths, their own weaknesses. We can get frustrated. I can get frustrated when I see how excuses become the end-all roadblock, right? This massive, border wall between, the fact and fiction, perception and reality.
So David, okay, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to focus on a teenager now or a kid that was right in your high school. Parent comes to you, and let's say you do dial in on someone that has that limiter, and you could pick another one, but I'm just going to pick on the reading unless you think you have a better example. How do you approach that kid now that's certainly not malleable like your 4 and 5 and 6-year-old? They sort of have a belief pattern in place.
Sure.
How do you unhinge, disengage, shift to more a capability mindset?
I think part of the ongoing game is catching the excuses, right? It's the negative thought patterns. And if you can catch them, recognizing them is step one. So most people on the planet don't recognize their own limitations because they're not aware of themselves enough. Right? Like you said about Hunter, like what story are you telling? Well, what excuse are you making for yourself? Oh, yeah, it is an excuse. Well, I can reframe this. Okay, cool. Let's have fun reframing things and seeing if it actually makes life easier. Because typically it does. And by doing that, okay, let's reframe what kind of student you want to be. Well, that has to do with the future pictures. We paint future pictures of ourselves. Okay, what do I look like at 9 o'clock at night? Well, I look like a kid getting ready for bed. What do I look like as a student looking at my report card? What do I see? Right? What do I see? How do I feel? What would I want to see? And how would I want to feel?
I see. So
and this starts to really connect.
Yeah. You're re-engaging the vision for themselves, David. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So as a young adult, it's really powerful because you're breaking any kind of codependency cycles that may play out with parents, and really a learned helplessness that may be playing out. Like, I can't do this, I don't know. And start to affirm who they are based on what they see, right? What do you envision for yourself? And by doing that, you can do that. That plays out for anybody. But if you do that for a young kid, it gives them a footprint and a place to stand, and it actually gives them control. What every child wants, every young child wants. They want control of their life, and they want to learn how to do that. They don't want parents nagging them. Well, what if I showed you how to get better grades? Would you like that? Yeah. What if I showed you how to get your parents off your back and you can get your cell phone back, whatever the issues are? They're like, yeah, that would be really great. What if I showed you how to be an amazing student athlete? Not just an amazing athlete, but amazing student athlete. Would you like that? Yeah, that'd be cool. All right. But no one ever talks about how to study. We jammed clubs and coaches down these kids' throats for years, multiple sports a season, where they learn how to master a sport. No one ever teaches kids how to master learning, how to master studying, how to master being a student. So they're left to figure it out. And that's powerful. Every kid is interested in that. It's just, how do you frame it so that they buy in? How do you frame it so it's...
That makes a lot of sense, David. Mastering athletics, because that is certainly one way we're trying to develop grit with kids. But nobody's really spending time with mastery of highly productive, high-performance academics and learning. The ability, that's one of the biggest things from an innovation front, David, that we run into is the ability for the old farts like me, is to unlearn. And for the new kids, how quickly can you learn? And what modality is best for you to learn in? So if you can learn super fast on video versus super fast with text, do you run into that with kids as kind of reteaching them how to learn, but then which modality they're best suited for?
So there is that plays out with reading and handwriting. So there's a really handwriting epidemic where most kids' handwriting is pretty bad. And the worst case is when you can't read your own handwriting by the time you enter high school. So you have to own that. I mean, you have to own that to such a high level that you have to demand accommodations and certain resources in the room. And that plays out also with reading. So many kids don't read. I mean, this generation reads significantly less than the generation before. And that has a lot to do with technology and just busy schedules, other activities. They get to high school and they really are behind. The standard hasn't changed. So now they have to figure out how to catch up. So audiobooks become super powerful. I have kids that will write a paper using their phone, speak to text on their way to a game. It'll end up in their inbox by the time they get home. They just edit it and they submit it.
Oh, man.
Now, who's teaching them that? No one. So, the proactive kid, the intrinsically motivated kid will figure that out pretty quickly. But other kids, no. No one's teaching them. And if they're the kid on the bus doing that, maybe they get ostracized by their friends. But that's a badass strategy.
Yeah, it is a badass strategy. I love that. So you actually told me this over the summer. You said kids' handwriting is really atrocious these days because I forget why you said that, but you primarily, I guess, because we're not writing as much. Is that part of it?
Yeah, we don't teach penmanship anymore. We give a kid a laptop and they're typing papers on a laptop at a young age. My 10-year-old's doing that right now. So what I'm watching for very diligently is her penmanship. And she will be going to summer school for penmanship if it ends up getting to the point where the fluency or the legibility is impacted. I just know enough at this point.
Because that's part of the brain. Isn't that part of the brain which synthesizes between different regions is by actually manually writing? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think. Well, the penmanship of things it has a lot to do with just practice, right? I don't practice as much as I used to, so my penmanship is just stunted. It got to a point where I could spell words, right? And I could write, but then the teachers moved right to technology way too early. And so I see kids graduating high school and not even interested in writing. Kids don't want to write on paper anymore. And they almost refuse. So when you think about other kinds of deficits that play out when I don't write things down, when I don't plan things out in a thoughtful way, you can see the impact of that play out as a young adult, as an adult. So learning penmanship at a young age has so many benefits that are going unrecognized as significant deficits for those and for a generation of kids that really, we didn't put a lot of attention to penmanship. So now they have to kind of figure it out. Most do. Most are getting there. But you have to recognize that. You have to recognize that this is harder, man. Like, your handwriting is illegible. You have to type everything, or you have to practice on your own. You have to teach yourself how to write fast and legibly. That's hard, man. Like, you have to really want that.
Hey, David, I have a question for you as we kind of come to closure here on how do you teach kids that the FOMO, the fear of missing out, and I know you know what I mean, but let me just clarify this question a little bit. How do you teach kids post like 10 years old, 12 years old to use their technology in a way in which they can engage with a human being and have eye contact, number one, when someone is talking to them, but also they know when to shut down, and there's that urge that grips the adults as much as it grips the kids, but it's the fear that they're missing out on something. Like, have you found a way to help kids self-regulate that and become self-aware that their urge to grab the phone can actually is sort of a kind of an addiction that's not necessarily conducive to high performance? Yeah.
So at a young age, let me back up a little bit in terms of building blocks. First building block is teaching kids how to read. And I don't mean reading as in reading comprehension skills. What I mean is to be able to sit for extended period of time. And that can be done at a young age. So you can help children learn what it feels like to sit and attend to something for a period of time, passively, like reading, right? That skill is lost. And the consequence of that is we have kids that don't know how to sit and attend when it really matters, like upper middle school, high school, college, right? They don't have a comfort level with that process, right? So where do you start? You start by having a culture in the family around sitting and reading. Really important if you want to get this right. That's just the first thing you have to practice. Now, I didn't read much as a kid. To me, it was brutally painful to read, but I did learn how to sit for periods of time because it took me forever to get through assignments and get through work, and I did everything I could to get through every assignment. Other than that kind of kid, other kids, you have to practice it and you have to role model it. On top of that, you have to say, okay, when do I give them control over the technology that is going to battle them with this FOMO effect? When do I give it to them? When have they earned the right to have it, as opposed to it being a rite of passage that isn't a privilege? No, it's a privilege. It should be earned based on milestones, because you're going to get your ass kicked by the FOMO effect if you are not ready for it. And I'm going to be the parent that's going to deal with the consequence, because it's just how it plays out for a lot of these kinds of kids. So I have to be thoughtful about that. You have to have some prerequisite skills established and demonstrated to your parents before I hand you the technology.
Makes sense. That
is going to push that relationship and create more chaos in how you organize priorities than ever before. It's a game of priorities, man. But if I put friends and social life and FOMO higher up on the hierarchy of priorities than it should be, then I'm just going to deal with the chaos of that chronically, and I won't know how to figure it out, because I can't tell my friends I'm not available. I can't not respond to a message, right? That's why old school is much safer to say my parents won't let me out of the house than it was to say I don't want to go to the party, right? You save face. But in this generation, you can't save face. Like, you have the phone. Like, you didn't respond. You're going to have to answer to that.
Yeah,
so there's also this social consequence, right? So versus my parents take my phone at 9 o'clock at night. Everybody knows that. They take my phone at 9 o'clock at night. I'm unplugged. It's just part of the relationship. I want you unplugged at 9. I want you decompressing. I want you chilling. I want you just doing something quiet with yourself, like reading, chatting with your family, whatever, and not not having to be forced into that FOMO relationship. And parents that do that, their kids appreciate it. They get a good night's sleep. They don't have to worry about the chaos online. It's like parents took it. Awesome excuse. They love it.
So the kids that are beyond the middle school and in the high school age, how do you?
Yes. So let's imagine you've at that point and they have the control over it. I think there's some things you can do in terms of just the ongoing conversation, but they also need a role model. So they watch their parents. So what are their parents doing? I think a lot of kids will call their parents out on doing exactly what they do.
Completely. That's the point I made earlier, where it's like they don't care about what you say; they care what you do.
Yep.
Like if you tell them,
and they will call you out. Like there's parents that text and drive, and then yet the parent yells at them for texting and driving. Like,
yep.
There's a pot on the kettle black. So, not saying we can be perfect, but the awareness of that, your kids are watching. They're watching us. They're watching every move we make. So, the moves we make matter if we're trying to establish certain standards, and that can be a really big deal. If I set a culture in my house around technology-free periods of time, well, you're going to help your kid with the FOMO effect if it's a technology-free. Everyone's in the common area, getting their work done. The cell phones, well, it's almost irrelevant. Cell phones aren't really a big deal. It's the notifications on a laptop can be the same issue, but cell phones are symbolize everything. So they go into the charging dock after school, and you just set up a nice quiet standard, and parents have to adhere to it as well. Now, the other scenario I've thought about is really pushing the envelope around this expectation around cell phones. Cell phones are the most powerful tool. It's more powerful than a laptop, and what you can do with them. So there's a really cool game that can be played around using teaching a child how to use a cell phone as a productivity tool by helping them to generate income using it. Or they can only get one if they're using it to produce income. Or, to make a good job. So, there are kids that have babysitting gigs, and they need their phone to communicate with the 5 families that they babysit for. There are kids that ref Little League. There are kids that ref soccer games. There are kids that have lawn mowing businesses. So there's really nothing wrong with teaching your child how to use the technology to produce as opposed to just distract. So what we do is we give them the tools and let them use it as the most powerful distraction tool on the planet. And then all of a sudden we expect them to naturally transition into having it be a productivity tool. And that's foolish to think that that's how it works. So I think it'd be really cool if there was a shift around, I'll give you this, you're only getting this phone. Is if you've proven to yourself and to us that you have a need for it. Not a want for it, a need for it. So figure that out. When you have the need, then you've proven to us that that need is real. Then we'll help support that need by the technology that may be used to support it.
Yeah.
Like I have to communicate with my parents that I'm babysitting for.
I love that.
So that's really cool. I haven't gone anywhere with that, but I think that is a really interesting direction that I think is so affirming to the kids that would be part of it. It would be painful to negotiate as a child, but the outcomes would be ridiculously beneficial. And no kid would 10 years down the road wouldn't look back and say, you know what I got to thank you for, Mom and Dad, is you made it super hard for me to get a phone, and you made it relevant to my future with how I got that phone. That'd be cool.
So Dave, as we wrap up, I want you to talk about your moonshot, what you are attempting to do with your business and with your overall vision and mission. If you could share with the audience about that, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So, I've got to credit you a little bit for this, Bill. People don't know that out there, but Bill is very much a mentor to me. He's usually about 100 steps ahead of me, and does take the time to look back and help out his little brother along the way. So in that, there's a vision of things that he's helped me cultivate that I want to appreciate in this answer. So, I'm very, very passionate about the work I do, so that's never an issue. What can be hard for any of us is how do you see a vision in that, right? How do you hold on to a picture that can resonate viscerally with what you're trying to create? So my goal is to impact 10,000 people every year and to have that grow exponentially as I interact in presentations, coaching sessions. Now, I have a team of coaches that work with me right now. They're phenomenal. And I have a training model that trains everybody on what to do and how to do it. This has been a massive undertaking, but it's been much easier when I hold on to a vision like that. So I just want to thank you, Bill, for kind of helping me to kind of cultivate that and to harness what that vision can look like as it relates to the entrepreneurial kind of drive and outcomes.
There's an old saying, David. I don't know whether it's Buddhist or whatever it is, but there's a teacher and the taught create the teaching. So you have done the same for me, and I think that the audience is going to gain a tremendous amount from listening to this. And we're going to put on the show notes the best way to reach out to you. Actually, what is the best way to reach out to you? What would you prefer if anybody here listening wanted to get in touch with you to have further conversation?
I think you could probably find me by Googling, but I will probably provide my LinkedIn. You can find me on there. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at effectiveeffortconsulting.com. And you could type in Dr. David Murphy, and you could type in Boston, and I would show up. I hope.
Yep, there you will. I know.
I spent a lot of work this summer trying to make sure that would happen. So, but and then I'll have my cell phone. I typically make my cell phone very available, whether I respond instantly or via text message. I am not far away from anybody who needs help. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that aren't being answered on this podcast, especially as it relates to your struggles.
Dr. David Murphy, it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun. Talked to my brother about all your expertise.
Yeah, super cool.
You're definitely going to transform the world, and it starts with a big vision, and 100%. I'm glad that I can help with that, and we can get out to multiple tens of thousands of people that are listening to the show. So thank you, David, and we'll talk to you shortly.
Awesome, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity.
So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Redzone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.